This dude's story is bananas. He has this very diverse, remarkable acting and entertainment career, yet he had years and years in the military. Did anything happen in the military, without being personal, that changed your perspective on life in general?
It pushed me beyond my perceived limits because I thought my limits were here. The Marines showed me, no, it's not even close. When I was at Ground Zero, just days after 9/11, moving rubble by hand in the bucket brigades, the devastation all around, those are things that move you. My reserve unit was in Manhattan. We were activated the night of September 11th. It was 6 stories of rubble. We didn't know if there were any survivors.
Right.
So it was still search and rescue. So they couldn't bring any heavy bucket loaders or heavy machinery because they were afraid of collapses and cave-ins. So everything had to be done by hand. There was a Burger King that was all blown out and everything, but that's where we staged our gear, and then we worked out of that corner. And we just were like ants going up a hill, just passing buckets up and down. And you see these things, and then you go over to third world countries, and you go to Albania and you see the refugee camps that we were setting up for the people in Kosovo. I'm handing out leaflets to stay away from these cluster bombs and these minefields. I couldn't read, so we had to do everything in pictures. And when there's no law and order, it's caveman rules. The Marine Corps definitely changed my life in so many ways. It was the bridge from boyhood to manhood.
Welcome back, everybody. You know what? You're going to be entertained today, and you're going to learn a bunch. This dude's story is bananas. It's literally bananas. Like, when I quote some of this story to you, you're going to go, there's no way one human being's actually had this life, but he has. So here's just a few movies you probably never heard of. Like The Other Guys, one of the funniest damn movies in the history of the planet Earth. Talladega Nights, like I could go on and on and on. By the way, one of the things that's hilarious to me is I did not know that he was on Saturday Night Live. I just did not know that. I knew Comedy Central. I knew all the other stuff that he's done, Modern Family. But here's the crazy thing. He's this very diverse, remarkable acting and entertainment career, yet he had years and years in the military. And when I say years and years in the military, I just want you to think about this, guys. This is a Marine Corps vet. How about this? He's a public affairs officer. His unit was out of New York, but listen to this really quick. Served in Liberia, Kosovo, Albania, Afghanistan, made lieutenant colonel, meritorious service medal, couple of them, Navy and Marine Corps medal, commendation medal, Joint Service Achievement Medal, Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal, Combat Action Ribbon, National Defense Service Medal, Kosovo Campaign Medal, Afghanistan Campaign Medal, Global War on Terrorism Service Medal, Humanitarian Service Medal, Armed Forces Reserve Medal, and a NATO member, and retired in 2013 after 23 years of service, and then becomes a famous actor. What the hell? We got to hear about this. Rob Riggle, welcome to the show, and thank you for your service.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. That's a great intro.
That's actually your life, dude.
Well, yeah, I can't deny it.
When you hear that back, does it sort of shock you to hear that version of your life?
Yeah. I mean, it's good. It's good to hear every now and then because I get so busy and I get so worried about the things I focus on the wrong things. So it's good to hear that because
we're going to fix you today. Yeah. He's already been to one of my events. I'm working on him. I'm fixing this dude because he obviously needs.
I loved your event, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're really good at what you do.
Thank you. Well, it turns out you're pretty good too. You know what I cannot get over?
Yeah,
is the diversity of your life. I mean, you also did Fox NFL Sunday for football for 8 years after my buddy Caliendo did it. Dumb and Dumber 2. You've been in some of legit, man, like some of the real funniest stuff ever you've been a part of. Did you ever see your life looking like this?
No. I wanted it. Okay. I had a picture in my mind.
You did.
But whether, that we all have pictures in our mind of, but whether it's going to come to fruition or not, that's to be determined. Mm. But you just mentioned Dumb and Dumber 2. I got to tell you, I've quoted that movie, it's Dumb and Dumber, my whole life. I mean,
you're telling me there's a chance.
Quite literally, I used that line the other day. Just the other day, someone said, oh, dude, it's a 1 in a million. I go, so you're saying there's a chance? So, like, we're always, that stuff is in the lexicon of our life. And I'll never forget the first day I show up to shoot on set. We're driving. It's a big long driving scene, a lot of dialogue, and we're in this hearse going down a highway in Georgia, outside of Atlanta, and I'm sitting in the back of this hearse, kind of in between the divider, and Jim Carrey and Jeff Daniels are in the front, Harry and Lloyd, and with the bowl cut and the wild hair, and I'm sitting between them, looking at them It was the most surreal moment of my life.
Like an out-of-body experience?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of surreal moments, but that was one that all I wanted to do was take pictures and call everybody I ever knew.
Well, you got a job to do.
And just say, oh my God, you wouldn't believe who I'm sitting between right now. It's Harry and Lloyd. And they're talking like Harry and Lloyd. And they're saying things like Harry and Lloyd. And I got to a point on the first take where I was watching them literally just going, this is the coolest. And there was a long gap, and I was like, that's my line, shit. And I had to jump in and say something.
That's amazing.
And then I realized, I'm part of this scene. I gotta focus here. I'm supposed to be doing things. I can't just, but all I wanted to do was just watch all of this.
I got to tell you, man, like, maybe I shouldn't have been surprised. I mean, I don't mean that in a demeaning way. I mean it in a complimentary way. When I told people you were coming on, it's the most excited anyone's ever been to have people on my show. Like, people were like, you're kidding me. Ask him this. I want to know about that. Of all the people, out of 400 guests.
You have amazing guests, too.
Yeah,
so that's quite a compliment.
Like, I'm telling you, man. So, like, if I don't get to some of this stuff, people are going to be furious with me. But I'm more interested in, like, the human part of it.
Sure.
Right? So, I want to know about, we'll talk about some of the magic moments of your life, which are like, we don't have time on the show to cover them all. But having said that, you end up in the Marine Corps with, a plan to go become famous, or you never knew you were going to become famous?
I was a fan of comedy my whole life.
Okay.
Voted most humorous in my senior class, that kind of stuff. Not class clown. I don't like that. Okay. Class clown's disruptive and just does fart noises with his armpit.
Okay. And you've never done that? Never done that.
Well, I'm not going to lie. Of course I've done that.
Okay.
But that was not my primary objective. I tried to be creative on my humor. And then when I got to college, I went to the University of Kansas, and I grew up, in the Kansas in the 80s. And to me, it was just never an option. Like, going to Hollywood or being an actor for real was just not something that was in the cards. It was a fantasy. It was a dream. Wouldn't that be cool? Yeah. But that's not going to happen. So what am I really going to do? That was always the conversation I was having with myself in my head. And when I was an undergrad, a guy I went to school with, who I admired greatly, Tim Raynor, he was a Marine going down the Marine Officer Program, and I remember I thought, well, I always wanted to serve, so maybe that's what I can do.
Are you serious?
Yeah. So I think I was 19 when I signed up, and then I got my pilot's license when I was in undergrad, and I got a guaranteed flight contract with the Marine Corps. So I thought, okay, I'm going to be Top Gun. But I still was a theater and film major. I still held on to that somehow. Like, I just kept wanting to learn and study and know more about it and do acting scenes and take acting classes and stuff. But I knew it was just a pipe dream, and I just needed a bachelor's degree to graduate anyway, and then I'll go be a Marine.
Yeah.
And it was, and then this is where and I'm giving you the Reader's Digest version here, but the Marine Corps definitely changed my life in so many ways. It was the bridge from boyhood to manhood. It was, it pushed me beyond my perceived limits, because I thought my limits were here. The Marines showed me, no, it's not even close. You can go a lot further. You can handle a lot more. You just have to have someone push you beyond. And so when they did that, I got the confidence.
Interesting.
I got the confidence to say, you know what? If I can do that.
Seriously. Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we did a 26-mile march overnight one night, full gear, flak jackets, helmets, weapons, full Alice packs, just 60 pounds worth of gear. And we humped out 26 miles one night from dusk till dawn. And then when we got to our objective, we set up a defensive perimeter, dug holes all day, like all of a sudden I'm like, I just did a marathon, and now I'm with no sleep at night. And I'm like, I can really do
hard things,
whatever needs to be done. And so then I started trusting myself a little bit more. And so as I was working my way through the Marine Corps, I just gained more and more confidence. And I thought, why not me? Why not me? If I can do all these things, and I think I'm pretty funny. People seem to react well. And then I got a call. I got a call from Kevin Custer, who's a good friend of mine, another college buddy. He was up in Chicago doing Second City. And he called me. I was down at Corpus Christi in flight school, and he called me and said, Riggle, you got to get up here and do this stuff. I said, I'm in the Marines, man. I don't have any options here. I'm standing here. He goes, I'm telling you, dude, this improv thing, it's what we did in college, but it has a name. It's called improv. And it's exactly what we're doing. And I'm telling you, you're better than the people that are up here.
Oh my gosh.
And so that call really ignited the flame in me to say, maybe I could do that. Maybe I could. So then that's what triggered my decision to stop flying for the Marines, because I was deep in flight school. I had just finished primary, got intermediates,
Wow.
and was going. I think I was going back to Pensacola to fly helicopters. Is the way my trajectory was going, and so I said, well, but once I pinned those wings on, they had me for quite a while.
You're going to be there a while.
A while, and to the point where it would be foolish to get out at that point, because I would have been in for 11 years.
But you were that far down the road, brother. That's a big gutsy move. Like to go, okay, I got this set. One of my dreams is right there.
Yeah.
Like one more step, I got my dream.
Very close.
But there's this other one, like there's no evidence for it, but that probably is my big dream.
That's it.
And you go, screw it, I'm going.
Yeah. And that was my second big decision of my life. The first one was to join. And that was and when I say decision that I had to solely own and make and commit to. And every other decision. Where are you going to school? KU. Because my parents, my family, friends, it was no brainer. A lot of no brainers that were decisions that were quote mine.
That's a big
But joining the Marines, that was solely mine, and I had to own it. And when I left flight school, that was solely mine, and I had to own it.
What did your family think when you said, "Hey,
everybody thought I was crazy"?
Crazy, yeah.
Yeah, it'd be the same thing as me telling you today that I'm quitting acting and comedy and getting into the rap business. Exactly. People would be like, "I don't think that's a good idea." I don't. Did you have any skills in rapping? Have you ever tried to rap?
Actually, that's the difference, though. Is you did have a proclivity and some skills.
I did.
For this
I had a proclivity. That's the right word. Proclivity for it.
But what's I guess most amazing to me is that those are two very different worlds. But I think the first lesson I take from you is that like actually doing really hard things created a confidence level in you that allowed you to pursue a completely different dream. And are you pretty convinced that had you not gone to the Marine Corps, that you would not have had the confidence to go pursue your acting or comedic career?
I like to think I would have gravitated to acting and comedy eventually, but I don't think I would have had the confidence to believe in myself that or to believe that I can withstand rejection.
How did you do both things though? I'm curious. Like, you didn't. I'll be honest with what I thought. I'd heard you were in the military. I'm like, okay, he was like, there a couple years. And that's a neat little thing on his resume, which by the way is a huge deal. Yeah. To even do that. So I want to make sure that when I say that the right way, but it wouldn't have been the big part of your story in the grand scheme of things. But then I'm like, no, this was 23 years. You were in combat locations. You were in theater, correct?
Yes.
So at one part of your life, you're over here doing improv theater, and then like 5 months later, you're in combat somewhere. I only understand that. Is that right?
Yeah.
Holy crap!
It was about like that.
You say that very matter-of-factly, brother. Like, I don't think that's Brad Pitt's path. I know Maniscalco really well. A couple other comedic dudes, great guys, but they weren't like in Kosovo one minute and like Second City in Chicago the second minute, right? Like that's
it is a unique path. It is a different path. But I did 9 years active duty, 9 years active duty, and then the other 14 were in the reserves. So while I was in the reserves, I still had to do my drills. I still had to do all my stuff. Matter of fact, while I was on the Daily Show, I had been promoted to major at the time. And so when you become a field grade officer, you have to go through a whole set of schools. Command and Staff College is one of them.
Okay.
So I had to, for 2 years straight, while I was on the Daily Show, once a month, I would get on a plane, fly from New York back here to L.A., my wife at the time and my little daughter would pick me up at the airport. We would drive down to Miramar, Marine Corps Air Station Miramar, and we'd get a room at the DoubleTree.
Yep.
And they would go to Legoland all day, and I would go to Command and Staff College all day.
Incredible.
Then I would meet them back at the hotel. I'd play with my daughter in the pool. I'd get her some gummy bears, and we'd watch some, Mickey Mouse Club until she fell asleep. Then I'd sit out there and have a glass of wine, talk to my wife, catch up about life and what's going on. And then the next morning, they'd go back to Legoland, and I'd go off to Command and Staff. Then we'd get back together, same thing, play, hang out, go to Applebee's, have dinner, and then they would drive me back to LAX, and I'd get on the red eye, take the red eye back to JFK, land at JFK the next Monday morning, and I would take a cab straight to the Daily Show.
That is bananas.
And go to work. And that was just, and that's how it was for 2 years,
So was there a moment in your career where you're like, I think this is happening now? Was there a moment where you went, yeah, this is going now? Or do you still sit here today going, I got to figure out the next 24 months?
I always got to figure out. My business, and you probably have experienced this to some level too, we eat what we kill.
Yeah.
And if we're not hustling,
Yep.
we ain't eating. And so I've constantly got 5 irons in the fire. 5. No less, often more. So, and that's just how it's got to be. And you have to get comfortable with that. And, you know, when I was in the Marines, I got paid on the 1st and the 15th.
Yep.
Not bad.
Right.
But those days were gone.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it is a survival instinct. It's burning your ships.
How have you had such longevity? I mean, I say this to people all the time that as my public profile has become whatever it is, I know a lot of people that used to be rich that are now poor. And I know even more people that used to be famous or well-known or working in Hollywood or that industry that no longer are. So the idea of have some staying power like what you've had on top of the crazy nature of your story, is it just the caliber of your work, or is there an extra hustle that you think you had from the core that, because you've had a long career.
Yeah.
I mean, even this movie list of, you know, your life is multiple decades now of the shows and the different things you've done. I'm sure hearing it back is still bizarre. It is for me too when I hear things. Yeah. But what do you think the keys have been to stay working so long?
Probably 3 things. Probably work ethic, probably a little bit of talent, and then being good to work with. I think those, as far as keeping the doors open, keeping the opportunities coming. Yeah. I think it's you know, not a tricky formula. You know, if you work hard, which means 5 irons in the fire, it means taking meetings, it means going and play with golf with some guy, it means taking a general meeting, it means doing a part sometimes that you hate, or that is, you know, you don't feel is quite what you should be doing to grow your career, but, you know, whatever, you do it. Building relationships, you know, all that stuff. And if you do a good job in this business, the sole purpose is to land a gig, do a good job on the gig. And if you do those 2 things, you may get a shot at another gig. Yeah. That's it.
You really legitimately only are as good as your last gig most of the time.
And I was foolish. I was so naive that when I thought the first gig I got was Saturday Night Live. So when I got it, I thought, ba-bing, we're done here. You know, I'm here. Here we are. And this is where I stay. And you know, and that was taken away very quickly. It was a blip on the screen. And when it was over, I dedicated myself for 10 years to getting that. And then when I got it, it was over really quickly. And through no fault of my own. I didn't do anything bad or wrong, or, you know, I had a very good year by everybody's standards. It was just it was an election year. They didn't get the ratings they wanted, so they cleaned house.
Cleaned it up.
I got caught in that. No problem. The people they picked up were fantastic, by the way, so whatever.
And you did okay after that.
Yeah, things panned out. But I made them. That's where I learned a valuable lesson, because I'll never forget the night I got the call from my manager saying, "Hey, they're not going to extend your contract."
You're probably surprised a little bit because you had done pretty well.
I didn't want to be blindsided, but I was. Yeah. And I remember I was so embarrassed because I was down at my parents' lake house, and my wife was there at the time. My wife at the time was there, and I had a little baby daughter, and I had a little pity party for about 15 minutes where I was mad, pissed, and this can't be right. And I want to call back and double check. And are they sure? And, how did this happen? And somebody needs to explain some shit to me. And I was just losing it. And then calmed down. And I just sat there for a minute, and I realized, well, I can be upset as I want to be, but it doesn't change anything. What I have to do now is find a job. And that was my first lesson in there is no finish line in show business. It's you get a gig.
There isn't in life.
And there isn't.
There isn't. The finish line is when you're done breathing, but beyond that, there isn't.
And so you get the gig, you do the best you can at the gig, and if you do, maybe you get a shot at another gig. And if you do a good job for them, maybe, and the more good jobs you do, maybe you start to get a reputation. Maybe some people, hear about
It's called Riggle.
Yeah, and I like the way he did that, or The problem is I play a comedic jerk really well.
Yes.
And so I end up getting a lot of calls to play comedic jerks.
Yeah. I think people should have some perspective. I understand a little bit, but Second City is sort of like the pipeline to SNL to some extent, right?
It's
like,
one of the pipelines.
It's one of them. It's one of the places. So I imagine when you get there, the dream then begins to get on SNL. It's one of the big dreams, right? Yes. So what you're hearing him tell you, everyone, this is a huge lesson, is that his first big dream kind of didn't go. Like he had it and he lost it. Mm-hmm. And then the question becomes, when that happens, then what do you do? Little pity party, not very long. I have this theory that in life, everybody kind of gets knocked down. It's not whether you're going to get knocked down or not, or whether you're going to lay there a while. People say, get right up. You're going to lay there a little while. The question is, how long? Is it an 8 count or is it like a 25 count? At some point, you got to get up and go like, okay, the next thing I'm going to do. I'm curious because you've done stuff with Farrell. Yeah. Was any of that because of Saturday Night Live? In other words, that experience generated a relationship here or there or something? So there was the seeds being planted in a failure of future success somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, the comedy world is, and I'm sure in the personal growth and development field, it's a small circle. Mm-hmm. You know, it's a small group, and you kind of know each other, and you know, reputation-wise, you know, if people are good people, if they're hustlers, if they work hard, if they, you know, fake. You get the word gets out. You can't hide some of that stuff, and then you get to know people one-on-one. So I had made a couple relationships at SNL, and you know, I'd always tried to deal honestly and openly, and I could go into more detail on that, but yes, Adam McKay, who's a great director, one of the best comedians and comedy writers I've ever come across. He saw something, liked me, and the respect was mutual. And so when these little opportunities came up, I got a little tiny part in Talladega Nights, and it got cut down quite a bit, but it didn't get cut out. The first movie I ever did, that's another lesson I learned. It was called Fade or Launch. Matthew McConaughey and Sarah Jessica Parker. And I had this big scene with Sarah Jessica Parker where we filmed in the streets of Annapolis, Maryland, and you know, it was awesome. And she was at the height of her Sex and the City thing, and nailed it. Told everybody on earth, I'm in the scene with Sarah Jessica Parker. It's going to be this great. I got a call 2 weeks before the movie saying we had to cut you out. Oh gosh! I was like, what? No. They go, yeah. It was, you know, your scene was great, but it was kind of repetitive of other scenes, so we just had to make some tough choices for time. And I'm sorry, dude, we had to cut you. So then I was like, oh my God, another lesson. Don't tell anybody anything until you see it on the screen yourself, until you're at the premiere and you see it on the screen. And I'm not kidding. To this day, I'm like, aren't you shooting something? I'm like, I don't know, maybe.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, sometimes.
You know what surprised me when I met you was we share this in common, and it surprised me with a lot of people who are communicate for a living, is you seem to be pretty introverted to me. Tell me if I'm wrong. And we were talking off camera that I think you are, and you're kind of reserved more than I would have thought. Maybe that's just what I'm doing to you.
It's it may be a perception too, because the characters I play are big, loud, obnoxious jerks.
So it's a comparative thing you're saying.
It may be, because I think I do walk into rooms and people are like, "You're not who I thought you were. I thought you were going to come in here and rip farts and knock glasses over and smash stuff and call me a B word." And I was like, "What?" Those are characters, you know. It's like I do love playing those characters, because you get to take a side of your personality out for a walk. That should never go out for a walk.
That's awesome.
You know, so that's the joy. I never should be able to be as rude or as crass or as obnoxious as I get to be in those movies. You are good at that. Thank you very much. You are really. I don't know what that says about me.
When you're doing, I just think it means you're talented. When you're doing the work, do you know if it's good or not? In other words, if you shot some things, you're like, I crushed this, and then you saw it, you go, ooh. Or like when you done, like in The Other Guys, like I just watched you. There's so much subtlety to the work in that movie, even like Wahlberg, the way his pitch of his voice and different things in the movie, the subtle things, I just think are, because I've done some work now with camera, obviously, it's really difficult to understand the subtleties of humor and timing. When you're in such a people forget this. There's a huge crew around you. There's mic guys. There's the grip. There's all the camera people. There's people moving around in
all
the back.
The extras that are judging you.
All the other stuff. Like, do you know in the moment I nailed this, or do you not know until you see it?
Sometimes you do. It's more of a sense. You're like, I feel like that went well. Of course, you don't say any of this out loud, but you're like, yeah. And all actors and all comedians are insecure to a certain level. So they're always going to, even if they nail it, they're going to be like, can we get one more? Can we get one more? Really? And the director is like, no, we can't. We got to move on. We got like 5 more shots to get done before lunch.
Yeah.
So no, we can't. But if you leave an actor alone long enough, he'll do 100 takes.
He would.
Yeah.
Do you have, I'm fascinated by you just because of the whole story and your personality and just the persona that I've seen. Do you have any imposter syndrome still? Like every once in a while, I'm being transparent. Every once in a while, I'm like, why is anyone listening to me? Not a lot. Usually it's like when I wake up in the morning, I'll have some of these like anxiety thoughts, but I'm like, is this going away? Like, why are they?
But that's the human experience.
Is it?
I think, I mean, I think at some point everybody has to, I mean, I hope at some point people question themselves. I mean, even a doctor is probably like, I think it's this, but let me double down. Let me get a second opinion. Let me call in my colleague. Let me, and then they want to bounce it off each other. I mean, I sit down and I'm like, I think this is funny. But I always want to check with someone and say, hey, what do you think about this? And they go, oh, dude, that's good. You're like, all right, yeah, then I'm on the right track. Or if they go, what do you mean? What are you talking about? You're like, oh, that didn't work.
But even in like the lull, careers have ebbs and flows, right? Like,
sure.
You're cranking. I got 3 movies coming out next year. You've had those years. I'm sure you've also had a year where you're like, I'm not completely sure what the thing is. Like you've got stuff going now that we'll talk about. But in those times, do you find yourself questioning yourself more, or are you just doubling down on your work ethic? What does one do when they're like, yeah, I'm in the plateau, so to speak, right now?
Boy, that's good. For me, it's always been just work harder. I know that's,
It's not.
And when I say work harder, I guess I mean get a new vision. So like Glengarry Glen Ross, always ABC, always be closing, right?
Yeah.
It's like one of my favorite scenes in the whole world.
Too.
But and what I've adopted and morphed it into is just ABD, always be developing. If you live in Hollywood and want to work in a life in the arts, ABD, you always be developing. If you're not developing, you're wrong. It's just that simple. So what does that mean, though? I mean, what does it mean to a director? What does it mean to a producer? What does it mean? We're all looking for stories. We're looking for things. We're looking for I look for characters. I have a show that I'm working on right now that I can't talk about, but it's all based on something I saw when I was, shooting another show.
Really?
And then that inspired me to do something. And then one time I was doing a bit on one movie with Nia Vardalos from my Big Fat Greek Wedding. She was the writer of the movie that we were filming and the producer. But we started, because she's a Second City comedian, an improver, and I am too. We were in a Walmart, and I started trying to sell her stuff at the Walmart, just doing a bit, right? And and then it morphed into me trying to be like a motivational speaker, but really bad at it. And so we just were cracking each other up all day long. Well, finally, at the end of the day, Gary, the main producer, just comes over and says, "Oh my God, you guys still doing that bit?" And we're like, "Yeah, it makes us laugh all day." And he goes, "Well, then you ought to write it up." And we're like, "Yeah, we should." So that's what we did. We wrote a screenplay together.
No kidding.
Yeah, just based on those characters. And then it didn't sell, so then we morphed it into an Audible series, and now it's on Audible. It's called Motivated.
Yeah.
So anyway, but so that's what I'm saying. Always be developing.
I think that's life. I think that's entrepreneurship too.
Yeah.
You better always be developing, always be executing, always be executing on what you're developing.
Yeah.
And
the Marines were no different. Like there's a one of the early readings we had to do as a young lieutenant was it's called Duffer's Drift.
Yeah.
And it's basically, the lesson of the thing is you're never done improving your defenses, basically. Like you get to a hilltop and you're like, all right, we got the hill, Well, great. What are you going to do? Okay, we should dig a trench line. Yep, dig the trench line. What else can you do? Put up some barbed wire. Good. What about landmines? Great. How about some claymores? Great. How about some snipers up high? Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Oh, you're never done. There's never a place where you can say, we're done here, guys. We're secure.
Very good.
You've always got more you can do.
Very good. And you came to my event. Why? Like, do you work on yourself? Like, do you read? Are you always trying to expand your knowledge or your knowledge of yourself or of humans? What is it?
I have this deep desire to know what I'm capable of, because I don't know if I've hit it yet. I don't know if I've missed it. I don't know. Sometimes right now I'm going through, last couple of years have been very difficult on a personal level, just because of my personal life. Okay. But so that's kind of left me a little adrift. And I think a lot of people are adrift right now because of COVID and, that whole pandemic really derailed a lot of people. And so, I think I'll be honest. I mean, when I was in 1995, I got my first set of Tony Robbins cassette tapes.
Okay.
And I remember in my little apartment in North Carolina, when I was stationed out at Cherry Point, I was going to night school to get my master's in public administration because that's the only thing they offered. So I was like, I'll do it. Also, it kept me out of trouble. You know, if you're going to school on the weekends and at night, you can't get in much trouble.
Yep.
And there's nothing to do in Eastern Carolina but get in a whole lot of trouble as a young Marine. But in the night, I would be, he'd say, we got to work on your physiology. Yeah. Get up, move. Yeah. You know, I'm serious. Get up. So I'm sitting there walking around my apartment, and put my chest out and then I still practice that all the way up to today. Like I remember before I would do stand-up shows, the opener would be out there doing something, and I would be behind the curtain doing this goofy walk back and forth where I would, swivel the hips, whatever, to get my body loose and get my mind right and get my head, my shoulders back and my eye contact down. And by the time I took the stage, I was like, I'm here.
Peak state.
Here we go.
Peak state. Yeah.
And it was all because of, learning some of these early lessons. And then I tried to apply so many things, time of your life and all the things that I bought all these things and I love it. Yeah. And I still write down my goals. Every January. Every January, I sit down. If I'm ahead of schedule, I'll do it at the end of December. But
me too.
Usually that Christmas break,
me too.
I'll take a whole day.
I love that day.
And I, who am I? What do I believe in? What am I going to accomplish? What are my core values? Write out my mission statement kind of, and then I get to what am I going to do? What are my outcomes, and why are they important? And then I start doing that, right? And I knock those out, and I go back and I look at all the way from 2000 whatever to present, because I do a new journal for every year, right? Yeah. And I go back and I look at them, and it's fun. It's really fun to look at it and say, wow, that's what was important to me then. I made 8 out of the 10 goals, and cool. And then I'm like, I'm on track. I did do that. I did. And you did it. You remember when you it was something you dreamed about, but now it's done.
Yep.
And now
we're identical. Your depth of your understanding of this is pretty deep. Like he just said something really important there, but he doesn't just write the goals down. Why is this important to me? One of the things Tony's taught me many, many years ago was, getting the depth of emotion, that you need deep emotional reasons why things matter to you. For me, when I go back and read mine, I don't know if you have this experience, I do end up achieving like 6 or 8 out of every 10 of them. Maybe not in the time. Sometimes my timing's off. It's a little bit delayed by a year or 3 or 5, but it ends up, I'm like, that didn't happen in 98 like I thought, but it happened in 2001.
Yes,
because I had planted the seeds. Probably the same for you.
And
right?
that's and a lot of that stuff that you plant today, it may take longer to manifest, but it will.
Yes,
if you stay consistent.
Yes,
consistency, boy. That's the rub. That's where I think.
Well, you just looked away, so I'm going to ask you a question. Do
well,
you think
because
that might be the difference over the last 24 months or so, or whatever it's been? That's in the difficult time, is it's derailed your consistency
completely.
Yeah,
completely.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm actually getting today. Actually, December 1st is my launch day, because this month I'm getting very serious about things. I'm trying to renew some things. Okay. And at the end of this month, I'm just going to sit down and got my 23 that I'm going to write about. I'm going to plan it out. The one thing I'll tell you, I don't mind telling you, is the one goal that has carried over since 2010, 2011, just keeps carrying over, and it bugs the hell out of me because I haven't done it yet, is I'm going to write a book.
Okay.
And going to your thing in Palm Springs got me off my ass enough to say, okay, so now I've taken some action steps.
Good.
I've actually started, so it's going to happen.
Good. Okay, I'll hold you to it.
Okay.
I'm not kidding either. I won't play with it, because one of the things that helped me in writing my book, someone said this to me. It might have even been Tony. I'm not sure. I should give them credit, whoever it was. But I was like, I want to write a book. And I'm like, I just don't have, I don't know where to start.
That's always the thing. It's such a daunting.
It's a daunting thing. You know what I did? I started writing the chapter titles first, not the chapters. What would the chapters be? And then I'm like, okay, these are the 12 chapters or the 15 chapters. And then I'll go back in and write those chapters. I didn't have a title for the book at first. Then they moved around. The sequence changed. But just the process of the motion of doing it, I'm like, actually, now that's not the book, but that chapter's actually the book. But it's just the beginning of doing something. I think when we get knocked down, number one, our consistency changes. And I think there becomes too deep of reflection analysis in our life. In other words, when something not good happens in your life, whether you have a financial setback or a divorce or a relationship, it's important to reflect on what did I do to cause this? What did they do? Where were the mistakes that I made? But I think that can become a pattern and a spiral where you end up in the reason you're successful, the reason everyone who's ever sat in your seat is successful, is that they have an ability to take action under adversity. They take action under failure. And they generate momentum. How do you sustain and keep momentum going? But how do you still have a life where you enjoy it, where you don't have to say yes to everything to have momentum? And I think when we get knocked down, we become too reflective. We go too deep into thought and not enough into what you did in the beginning, which was to step into spaces you were ill prepared for. When you get knocked down or you've had some success, ironically, your comfort level, your ability to be comfortable with not knowing as much as you need to know to take action increases. And that's something that you've got to guard against, is like, listen, you did what you did because you were constantly stepping into spaces that you had some preparation for, but not a ton. You didn't have time to reflect a whole bunch, and you didn't have a history to reflect on. And reflection also sometimes is dangerous because it creates a pattern of comparison. My life was like this. My career was like this. I used to look like this. And there becomes this negative thing we do to ourselves, which isn't comparing with other people. It's comparing with the former us. And you got to be really careful about that too. So those are all things. I will hold you on this book. Start writing the chapters, man. Just start writing the titles out of the chapters.
Well, and what you talked about also, the Marines, you know, their leadership program is the best in the world, as far as I'm concerned. And they, because so many things parallel some of the great leaders that I've read, even the Stoics. You know, I read a lot about the Stoics, and I'm like, oh God, this Marine Corps stuff is, because it's you know, the worst decision you can make is no decision.
That's right.
Right. You know, and most of the time you're only going to have about 80% of the information. If you're lucky, more likely you're going to have 20%.
Yep.
And you got to make a decision.
Yep.
So you just take the best information you have and you act. And then you'll sort it out. And the same thing when I used to write comedy, when I was on SNL or when I was Daily Show, whenever I was writing stuff, I was terrible because I had this perfection thing where I was like, I've got to write it perfect the first draft. It's got to be killer the first draft. Well, that's garbage.
Right.
That's just not real. It's not. So finally, and it's this thing where I have to coach you. You have to yell at yourself sometimes. Yep. My thing now is I literally just barf it onto the page.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Stream of consciousness. I'm just like, blah, 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 blah.
Yes.
And I'll throw it up on this page.
Oh my gosh, it's the exact word I use. I say throw it up onto the page.
Yeah. And then once I've done that, it's like the clay is now on the table.
Yes.
Now I go back and I say, yes, no, maybe, add this. Oh, that sparks a thought and all of a sudden you're writing a whole new thing.
Yes.
It was just sparked off of one thing. But if you don't get it out of you and you try to be perfect the first time, you're going to sit there and beat the tar out of yourself.
Oh my gosh, brother. So at the event you came to the night before, I was with the speakers. This is so huge for you all to hear two people that have had some success talk about this. So I've had this, like, because the first book, number one book, people like, publishers like, we'll give you this to write another book. Or I'm like, I don't have another book right now, right? Like, and the reason I don't have another book, because I think it has to be better than the last one. It has to be perfect this time. Whereas the first two I wrote, I was like, I'll just throw it up on the page, like you said. And at the dinner, for the speakers, the event you came to, they're going around the table like, you got to write another book. You got to write another book. And I'm like, I don't really have another book. And someone said something. Oh, one of the speakers said, I don't know what I'm going to cover tomorrow. And I said, well, just remember this. At any given time, people that are coming to an event like this, there's a lot of them in some form of pain. And we forget this. We're always trying to motivate. They're in some form of pain. They've had a divorce. They've had a financial setback. They're lost. They just don't feel good about themselves. Someone rejected them. You know, business isn't going the way they want to. And then I said, you know, I have this thing I do with my kids where I say, Bella, you remember, let me tell you about you.
That me in tears, man.
Thank you. And I said to her, let me do this. And the whole table's in tears. I look up and all of my friends.
I was too the next day.
Are in tears. And then they all go, that's your book. And I'm like, I think that is my book. I'm going to tell humans about humans. I think the name of the book is going to be, Let Me Tell You About You. But it wasn't until I just started sort of throwing up and expressing myself. It's nowhere near the direction I was going. Nowhere near. And I'm like, maybe it's even a kid's book on top of that. So it's a matter of when you're...
That's the magic of discovery, though.
Isn't
that the juice?
Yes, that's the juice.
I love that.
And that's the throes of your career or my career. We're in this sort of professional... This is a weird term, but it's a vibrational energy frequency of motion. And it's like, wow, that just came my way. That came my way. Man, I nailed that. I wrote this bit, and the punchline's totally different place than I thought it was going to be in the beginning. My comedic friends tell me this all the time. But they're the guys that are hot, like in comedy, like a Rogan or a Chappelle or Sebastian or, whoever's, but Dane Cook, anyone's been on my show, they're writing a lot. And a lot of what they write doesn't end up going anywhere, but because they're doing so much, little bit less reflection in our lives. Reflection's important, growth is important, but you can pass that line to where it's paralyzing, demoralizing, comparative, and you have to be really, really careful with that. I think.
Overthinking, as you know, is the fastest way to unhappiness.
It is.
And we all do it. And it seems like the older we get, the more we do. Because when I just remember being very, not myopic, I could balance a lot of work-life balance, but just having such a clear vision of like, I'm going here and I'm doing this.
Yep.
And that's it. And nowadays I'm like, I'm going here if it's okay with this person and that and this. And then when I get there, I'm going to do this, provided, of course, blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
And now I'm filling in blanks and I'm like, oh my God, it's so cumbersome now.
Yep.
And all I want to do is shake it off and move to a cabin in the woods for about 6 months, and everybody can pound sand, and I'll reemerge when I'm GD ready.
By the way, it's amazing because I've actually been having that conversation. A lot of my friends are like, you have all these things to do. Yeah. You could do this. You could do this. You got your TV show. I said, you know what I really want to do? I want to take 6 months off
and disappear.
I just want to collect myself. Like, I'm with you. Look at your face right now.
Oh.
I'm with you, brother. But the truth is that I also know that I have an obligation to the world and to myself to generate momentum, and that these opportunities, both you and I have been presented, are pretty big blessings in our lives. And if we're not careful, we miss that rhythm again. We miss that chance. And so we have to keep executing and keep creating.
I like that version better than I got 2 mortgages. I got a kid in college. I got a kid other kid in school. I got, the responsibilities weigh you down.
I know. And they're going to be there anyway.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is those facts don't change, but if you stare at them, they get bigger.
That's it.
If you stare at them, but if you stare at your vision, if you stare at where you want to go, if you're just, by the way, what you said earlier about just creating and taking meetings and outworking everybody, you also start to convince yourself that I deserve stuff other people aren't willing to do. Most guys with 2 mortgages and kids in college and a divorce and this or that or the other thing, and they're on the other side of 50 years old, they're not executing like me. They're not working like me. They're not taking meetings like me. They're not playing golf with that guy I want to play golf with. They're not doing those things, but I'm doing things other people aren't willing to do, just like I did when I was in the Marine Corps, just like I did when I was starting out, just like when I did those extra reps on the improv stage and everybody else went home. Yep. That's my recipe. And when you get back to your recipe, you're like, oh, I remember this guy. Yeah. This dude's familiar to me. I like this guy.
And the struggle is real. Like you hear these stories, and I love listening to your podcast. I love hearing Dane talk. As a matter of fact, so much I learned from that conversation you had with him.
It's a good one.
But it is real. Like you don't just set out one day. 7-8 years grinding at the UCB Theater in New York, which is in a basement underneath the Gristides, and then I would go do 1 a.m. improv jams for 9 drunks down in the lower village. Wow. Why? Because it was free stage time. I didn't get paid a dime doing improv, not 1 penny. In fact, it cost me money to take cabs and trains to get to these places, but it was stage time. And I got a master's degree in comedy from some of the best. My teachers were Amy Poehler, Matt Besser, Matt Walsh, Ian Roberts, all the writers from Conan, all the writers from Colbert and the Daily Show guys. And I learned and played with some of the best people you could ever hope to, and the guys I came up with, Paul Scheer, Rob Hubel, Owen Burke, Chad Carter, Jason Mantzoukas, go down the list of all these unbelievably talented individuals. That's who I got to spend my time with. And I would go when I wasn't even performing to do lights and sound, do tech for other people's shows so I could watch their comedy and get to know them, meet them. And to be around the theater on the outside chance that a comedy show broke out and they invited me to come play or something. Because that happened all the time. They'd be like, hey, we're short a guy. You want to play with us tonight? But yes, because I haven't played with this group. That's not my normal group. Just put yourself in that environment. So you have to grind. You have to do that stuff. You have to, if you want it. Now, I'll never forget. I was working a couple jobs, and I had just taught an improv class. And I was tired. I'd gotten up early to go work out with the Marines at 5 that morning. We went and played basketball. I wasn't a bad workout, but I was, it was still 5 a.m. And I just walked out of teaching an improv class, and it's 10 p.m. and I'm exhausted. All I want to do is go home, have my wife at the time, give me a smile, and we'd have some burritos or something. And I stood out there, and I remember I was like, Saturday Night Live auditions are coming up. And and you have to be invited. It's not like you just get to go in. But I had been winked and nodded at, like, you're kind of on a short list, so stand by. And I remember thinking, I don't have the characters ready. I don't have the stuff ready yet. And this is going to, if it happens, it could happen within a month or two. So I'm sitting there going, well, why did you quit flight school? You quit flight school to come to New York to be an actor and a comedian. This is you're looking down the barrel at a real opportunity, a life-changing opportunity. And you want to go home? You want to go, and I'm standing on the corner of 31st and 7th Avenue. I'll never forget. It's really close to Madison Square Garden. There's a Starbucks across the street, and I'm standing on the corner going, I just want to go home. And I'm yelling at myself. And I said, and I'm cussing. Yeah. And I'm saying, get your ass down to the UCB. Get your ass down here right now. And I would argue. I don't have anything to say. What am I going to do? Walk in? I don't care. Just get up on stage and improvise something. You're an improviser. Just improvise something. You've got to create these characters. Why the F did you even come here? And I'm barking at myself. And people are walking by me. They're thinking it's just another New Yorker, who's lost his stuff. And I had this argument with myself, and I was about to get in the cab to go home. And finally, I just said, you're right. I won the argument. And I went, instead, I went back downtown. Instead of up, I went downtown to the UCB theater. I went down. It was Wednesday, so it was like hump night, which at 11 o'clock, the show started. It went all the way to like 1 a.m. And you could put your name on the list, and you got 5 minutes of stage time. And you could put it on twice. You could do stand-up characters, improv bits. You could do a puppet show if you wanted. You got 5 minutes. So I went down. I put my name on the list, and then I put it on again at the next opening. And I went into the green room, and I just said, okay, I've got to create 2 characters right here and right now. And I remember a character I did where I was I played a Marine Corps recruiter who wouldn't take no for an answer. Yeah. So I said, okay, that's going to be one character. I'm going to go out into the audience. I'm going to recruit somebody from the audience to join the Marines for 5 minutes. It doesn't matter what they say. They're not getting away from me. So that's all I had. That's all I had.
That ended up being a sketch on Saturday Night Live, didn't it? Something like that.
It didn't. I wanted it to be. Okay. But so then I went out and I was, hey, everybody, I want to thank the UCB for allowing me to come in here today. My name is Sergeant Jackson. I'm here to recruit. Now, listen, I don't know how you all are playing for college, but let me tell you something. Why don't you take the burden off your parents? Be your own man. You, sir. I just went after them like they went after me, right? Yes. And I remember all the jargon. So I just attacked this poor kid. And he's like, he was a sweet kid, awesome. Who was played along. But and then I said, okay, then the next thing, I'm going to be this old coach who has to teach a sex ed class. Okay. And so I came out and because based on a real character, I remember my 7th grade gym teacher, Dewey Cundiff, I'll tell you his name, sweet man, the sweetest man in the world. And he go, oh man, he always called us men, calm down now, calm down, man. He goes, no, man, the state says I need to tell you about sex. And so here we go. And he goes, now, does everybody know what the penis is? Like that's, and so he would tell, and of course we were relentless. 7th grade boys are the worst. So we'd be like, Coach, what does this mean? Coach, what does that mean? And he'd be like, oh God, don't say that, man. Don't say that. And he was trying to hush us down. So I just turned that into a character. And then as he was trying to describe the sex act, he would have these heart palpitations and he would start to sweat and he would almost lock up and die. And that was getting a response. So that turned into one of an audition character. But that I just had to get the ball rolling. It's that vomiting onto the page. Yes, but I was doing it live on stage. I went in and I jotted down a couple bullet points and what the character's main thing was going to be. He was going to go out and teach a sex ed class. I was going to go out and recruit this guy. And that's what I was going to do on stage. And then you just build from there.
Gosh, brother.
And so then I managed to put together a couple of characters and a couple of things, and I got it. I did get the call to audition,
and now you're ready.
And I got it.
That's where you're ready. By the way, one of my favorite things ever on the show is the last 5 minutes of what you just said. Yeah. It's one of my favorite things ever because it's a real life example of real life. And one of the things about doing this, life is not the way it is in the beginning. The way it is in the middle will be different than it is in the end. And same with almost every other thing. A marriage isn't the way it is in the beginning, isn't the way it is in the middle, isn't the way it is towards the end. One way or the other. Businesses we have. It's one way in the beginning, it's a little bit different in the middle, and it'll be different towards the end. Same with careers. One of the things is I'm watching you with that in mind. And by the way, everyone should just accept that. The reason we want to get moving, the reason we want to do things is there's correlated spaces. Like for example, like I was just a speaker for many, many years. I had no idea that that was going to lend myself into this thing that was created called social media. Then that was going to be a venture. And then that somehow, because I was a broadcast major 30 years ago in college, this thing called podcasting would start. And this degree I got 30 years ago comes into fruition now because I got a pretty deep voice and I know what I'm talking about. So it's different. And then the entrepreneurial opportunities. I had a financial company. I had no idea later I'd have a chip company or a chocolate company or a baseball card company. It changes. And you have to be open to those ebbs and flows of your life. As I'm watching you, this is just two friends talking, but, and I know you've done a little of this, but I thought about you a while ago, that place that you and I were both talking about where I belong. Ray Romano's also a member there. And Ray, like you, I don't know Ray very well, but we've had encounters a few times. He's a pretty serious guy one-on-one also. Mm-hmm. Like you would not, I think if you met most comedians, even Sebastian or whoever, I don't think you would think they were comedians when you met them. They're typically quiet. Some of them are actually kind of dark people too, right? Like that's where the comedy comes from. Yeah. And I watched this thing with Ray. I don't remember what the movie was, but it was about him and a really good friend. He had you probably know it because you know the world, but he just had this really good friend. And I think the friend was dying, but it was a dramatic role. It wasn't a funny role. Do you know the movie that I'm talking about?
I don't off the top of my head, but I do know that his dramatic work is fantastic.
It's fantastic. And then I think of some of the dramatic work I've seen Bill Murray do. And I'm like, wow, when I watch you and the way that you express yourself, I just have to wonder if, obviously the comedy world is your world and that's where you've cut your teeth, but I actually wonder if that's part of that path, that it's not in the beginning, that it might be in the middle, that it could be at the end for you, is more of that stuff. Have you ever thought about that?
Absolutely. I think anybody who chooses a life in the arts, you do things and then you want to scare yourself. You want to try something new. You want to kind of step out and you know, at first you might not be received. I remember when Bill Murray in 1981 did a movie called Razor's Edge where he played a World War I veteran. And he was drunk in a pool because he was obviously hurting and dealing with it through self-medication. And, you know, he would say like wise ass lines, but they were really poignant lines. And the audience was laughing because the expectation was comedy.
It was him.
You know, and the truth is that the performance is great. He's great. He's, you know, he can do that because there's real depth to him.
That's what I see in you.
It's not received. Well, thank you. That's very nice. I did a movie called Midnight Sun where it was more dramatic, where I played a guy whose father whose daughter was dying, and that was my first. You know, it's also getting an opportunity.
Sure.
You know, and so that was the first what I would call dramatic role. I played a straight role, which I would call a straight role in 12 Strong, which is an interesting story because the guy that I played was actually my boss in Afghanistan.
You're serious?
Yeah. Crazy story.
Oh,
crazy story. So in the movie, I played Lieutenant Colonel Max Bowers, who was the CO of 3rd Battalion, 5th Special Forces Group. And when I got to Afghanistan, I got there when the movie ends when they take Mazar-e Sharif. That's how the movie ends, 12 Strong. Probably a couple weeks after that is when I showed up and joined them. And so when I got there, I reported to Lieutenant Colonel Max Bowers. I was a young captain at the time. Central Command had sent me over to help out with public affairs and civil affairs. And so in the movie, I play him. So I was like, I know this guy. I used to brief him every morning and every evening.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
What are they? I think of guys even like Hanks, who was kind of like bosom buddies, funny dude in the beginning, and we all forget. Or even Robin Williams. Like a lot of people have made that move where they've done both, and Ray has done very well as well. I don't know.
I like watching Ray, and I play golf with Ray too up in Tahoe. And so we play in a lot of tournaments. Sweet man, very sincere.
Yeah.
And a lot of comedians that I know, it's the only comedian I ever met that kept it on all the time was Robin Williams.
Okay.
And it might have been because he was manic, you know, or whatever. But the sweetest man on earth. I absolutely loved him. We did some USO stuff together. He actually came down to the UCB Theater in LA and we did an improv show together. And he's a machine. It was special. It was truly special to be in his presence. But most comedians, you know, you can't sustain that kind of stuff.
I can't even imagine.
A lot of times you just want to have a conversation. You just want to relax.
Relax.
Will Ferrell's the most humble, sweetest guy in the world. He loves just to talk about the Trojans or about the Lakers,
Yeah.
and he's really excited about it. And what's going on with you? And how's the fam? And he's always in. But then what I love about him is when he flips the switch, it's the best, because I'm like, oh, it's playtime, because I can see it in his eyes. He starts getting like, here we go, and I'm like,
I just saw it in your eyes.
It's on,
I just saw it in your
it's
eyes.
so fun. And you're right. And there's also a lot of the land of broken toys, out there. A lot of guys are hurting, and that's why they got into to deal with it.
I just saw your eyes change right there too. I love this, so I want to go a little longer if it's okay with you.
If it's you tell me.
She's okay. I want to go a little longer because it's too good, and I know what my audience is thinking right now. They're seeing side to you. I think maybe they don't know, for most of them. And I think that the human side of you, with all your success, helps people. Plus all the clues you're leaving, as we've been talking. Like everything you say, even though you don't know it, is leaving clues of success or the story of how to move to make your dream happen. I just wonder for myself, did anything happen in the military, without being personal, that changed your perspective on life in general? That, you thought, well, the heaviness of this that I just had to experience means... I do that sometimes. Like when I'm in a high pressure situation, I'm like, yeah, this is something, but wasn't this other thing in my life. I'm just worried about how your experience in the Marine Corps shaped your worldview, your life.
Yes, I would say yes. There were clear moments when you. Did you
hear the list of all the medals?
Yeah, yeah. But there were clear moments. I remember, you see the kids in Liberia, out there on UN Drive when you're looking over the wall from the embassy, and you see the conditions they're living in. Heartbreaking. You see the. I remember when we were in Albania, we had a Apache crash, and the pilots were killed, and we were loading their caskets onto a C-130, or it wasn't a C-130, it was a C-17. Okay. And we were loading, and the whole base stopped, and everybody came to attention, and they blew taps, and and they load that on. When I was at Ground Zero, just days after 9/11, the next day after 9/11, moving rubble by hand in the bucket brigades, the devastation all around. Those are things that move you.
Wait a minute, you were at 9/11 on 9/12?
Yes, the next day. So my reserve unit was in Manhattan.
Yeah.
And we were activated the night of September 11th because they closed all the bridges and tunnels, and we were told to report down to Ground Zero in our boots and boots and utilities. We got down there. We reported to One Police Plaza the next morning. In our boots and utilities, and they gave us a surgical mask, and when we went and just started, because at the time it was 6 stories of rubble. We didn't know if there were any survivors,
right?
So it was still search and rescue, so they couldn't bring any heavy bucket loaders or heavy machinery because they were afraid of collapses and cave-ins, so everything had to be done by hand. So I remember we were over on the corner of the tower that was furthest south. I think that's Tower 1 or 2, Tower 1. And there was a Burger King that was all blown out and everything, but that's where we staged our gear, and then we worked out of that corner, and we just were like ants going up a hill, just passing buckets up and down, 12 hours on, 12 hours off, 12 hours on. 12
I have
hours
to
off.
think that changes your perspective on life.
Well, it does, and you see these things, and then you go over to third world countries, and you go to Albania, and you see the refugee camps that we were setting up for the people in Kosovo. You see the Afghan children. I'm handing out leaflets, to stay away from these cluster bombs and these minefields. And this is what a mine looks like. Don't touch this stuff, because they were illiterate. They couldn't read. So we had to do everything in pictures. And you realize what a lawless country looks like. You realize when there's no law and order, when there's no, it's caveman rules, and so it's anarchy. It's this, and so you become very grateful.
Yeah.
You become so grateful for this.
Remind yourself of that. I mean, maybe today's just, I'm sure you do, but just.
And we walked away from 9/11. So many people didn't.
Yeah.
And those.
Does it ever dawn on you? But no, it's good. Does it ever dawn on you that you served all this time and that at some point, guys, just picture this, like you're in the Marine Corps, you're in service for that long of a period of time. And then you end up going over to entertain the very troops that you were once a part of. Was that not a trip for you? Was that for Comedy Central? Who was that for?
It was awesome. It was a couple times. I did it once with the Daily Show, and then another time, I've done 3, I think, big tours. And one with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, did his Christmas tour, which was amazing. But yeah, I was always pissed because I never got a USO show, not one. All my deployments, I never got one entertainer ever. So I was like, that sucks. So I said, if I ever got to a place where I could, I would. And so I did.
Your level of humility is remarkable, brother. You know that I always assumed Riggle was a stage name, but you said earlier, Riggle. Is that your real name?
That's my real name. That's my real name. I guess it started as Regal.
Okay.
And it was my dad in retirement has gotten into genealogy.
Okay.
So he has traced this part of the family all the way back to 1568 in Germany.
Holy crap.
Yeah. And apparently my ancestors came over in like 1741 and settled in Pennsylvania, and then worked their way from Pennsylvania to Indiana to Iowa down to Kansas.
All the way to you. Little did they know back in the day that they were eventually developing like the perfect name for a comedic actor, Rob Riggle.
Yeah, and so it was Regal,
yeah.
I guess, when they first landed here, and then it morphed into Riggle, and that's just what it's been ever since. So,
all right, last thing. Give me a good story. Give me one story of anything you've done on a movie set or anything like that. You're like, I can't believe this is happening right now, or it's the hardest I've laughed, or some experience with one of these amazing people that you've collaborated with in your life, where you had this story where you were with Carrie
Jeff Daniels.
And Jeff Daniels and Jeff in the car. That's remarkable. I would be there too. I had a former president of the United States one time. I won't say which one, but he was in the White House. It was his third day in office. It was a guy that I worked with, and he was in a very stressful meeting, and he leaned back in his chair just to collect his thoughts. And when he looked back, right behind him was the picture of Lincoln. And this is the dude who was running the country at the time. And he's like, I just leaned back so they didn't hear it, but he leaned back and it's Abe Lincoln picture behind him, and he goes, I can't believe that I'm here right now. And he goes, then I had to gather myself. You're the president of the United States, dude.
You're
So you're actually the guy in that chair. But imagine what that must be like to sit back there and go, this is where Lincoln was, and now I'm here. No matter who you are as a human being, even someone at that level, he shared with me, I don't think confidentially, I didn't say who he was, what that experience was like. Have you had one of those outside of that Carrie moment, or you just laughed your whatever off at some point with somebody?
Oh, yeah, I've been so blessed. That's the best thing about working on comedies.
Yeah, imagine.
Generally speaking, you're hanging out with some pretty funny people.
Right.
Generally speaking, everybody's in a good mood.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, the scenes have a funny twist to them. And generally speaking, everybody's throwing new ideas out there because there's what's on the page, and then there's what you bring to it as well.
But on Saturday Night Live, is there someone that walked in or anywhere in your life you're like,
there was so many cool things. I remember on Saturday Night Live, I did a sketch with Liam Neeson.
Yeah.
And we came off.
I have a particular set of skills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was the sweetest man in the world, but I was, I was always shell shocked. I was always I'm still shell shocked or awestruck by some of these talented people that I admire so much.
That's a big one.
So I had just done a scene with him, and it went really well. And I came off stage, and Lauren kind of sits underneath the stage. He has a little video village that he sits in. And I came off, and Tom Hanks was sitting next to him. And Tom jumped up and goes, "That was awesome!" And I go, I was like, "Thank you, Tom Hanks. That just happened. Oh, I just want to go call all my friends right now and tell them it just happened. I gotta go." But he stood up out of his seat and kind of gave me the old, bro awesome. Hug, and I was like, "Oh, that's so cool." And then there's all kinds of stories. I mean, on 21 Jump Street, and I'll try to make this quick because but we'd been shooting night shoots. So when you flip schedules, everybody's upside down. And you're off sleep, everything's kind of weird. So we kind of flipped to a night shoot for like 3 or 4 days in a row, and it was the last night shoot, and we were shooting all the way until the sun came up. I mean, it was, and we were up against it because this is it, because then the weekend was coming, and we didn't want to have to do another night shoot, so we had to get this stuff done. But everybody's energy was low. So it's the end of the movie. It's where I get shot in the ding-a-ling. And it's where they cuff me, and they, Channing Tatum finally reads the the Miranda rights. He gets it right, and they're celebrating, and it's this thing, and the energy was kind of low, and the crew was kind of moping, and so we were also improvising because we were trying to wake everybody up and kind of get ourselves going. So I get shot in the ding-a-ling. I go down. They they cuff me or whatever, and I'm like, "You shot me in the ding-a-ling." I didn't say that.
Yeah, right.
But I said, "You shot me in the thing." And then I think Jonah goes, "Oh my God, is that it?" Right? And he points off, and it's off screen. It's all off screen, right? And I go, "Ah!" And I scream like it's there, you know, and so get a big reaction, you know. Well, then the next take, they were like, okay, this is great. Do it again. You know, get used to, and then you tell him to pick it up. So we were like, okay, so here we go. Second time, you know, is that it right there? Oh, you got to get it. Pick it up, you know. And he's like, no, I'm not picking it up, you know. And I was like, pick it up, help me out. Because I'm handcuffed at this point. So then I go, so I lean out of frame, right? And then they go, okay, that was great. Now we got to do it again. This time, they go over to Crafty, get a banana, bring it over here, cut it in half, and we're going to, I was like, why do you have to cut it in half? Anyway, they cut it in half, and they put fake blood all over it. And so now I go out of frame. I come up with this bloody banana in my mouth, you know, and I'm still handcuffed. And I bit through it, so it popped out of my mouth, you know. And so it just turns into this ridiculous thing, right? It just keeps snowballing. Gosh, it's a snowball going downhill. And it just keeps going and going. And the crew's loving it. We're laughing. We're all having the energies back, you know, like it. So we have this great thing. And I'm thinking, no problem. You know, the good people at Sony, there's no way this is going to make it onto the movie. This is just for us because they're going to end the movie right when they get the Miranda rights, you know. Well, they left it in the cut that tested, and it got big laughs. So they were like, you can't get rid of it now. So they kept it in the movie. So now it's in the movie for the rest of my life. And all it was a big screw around, right? Just to get the energy up and have fun. And it was cracking each other. Like we were all laughing, having a good time with it. But
that's awesome.
Something like that was just an innocent screw around, have some fun, improvising, you know, get the energy up type thing, now lives forever.
Oh, dude, that's huge. That is the best. I wish that was in the beginning. I hope everyone stuck around to hear that. What's The Curse of Bridge Hollow? Is that on Netflix right now? Yeah, that was a kind of a family Halloween movie with Marlon Wayans. Okay, with Marlon? Yeah, he's a great guy. And Kelly Rowland and some other wonderful. The young lady, I'm so bad about this. I forgot her name. I'm sorry. She was on Stranger Things. But anyway. She's good too. Great. Dude, I loved today. Now, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have you back when you write your book. Okay. And you are writing your book. So we're going to make sure that happens together. This is what I was hoping it was today. I knew I would laugh, but I knew people would learn a lot about you and also about how to become successful, how to overcome difficult times. I also appreciate your openness and your vulnerability too. One of the great stories, one of the most amazing lives so far. With 52 more years at least to go, you're probably halfway done. So thank you for I like today. The way you think. Hey, guys, follow Rob Riggle on social media. You already know who he is, but go follow him there. Thank you for today, brother. Oh, thank you. And thank you for what you do. I really appreciate it. Yeah. Well, I think we're going to be friends for a long time, so I'm fired up. Hey, guys, this is the perfect show to share. I wanted him on for this time of year because you all need to laugh a little bit. You all need to learn a little bit. You all need to be inspired a lot. And you got all of that out of today's show. So you're welcome. How can you pay me back? Share this with people that you care about. You want to bring some joy and some inspiration into their life and a little inside peek into Hollywood and this man's remarkable life as well. Thank you again for your service, bro. Thanks. God bless you, everybody. Max out. Power of one more. Go grab my book. Take care.